Well, Joey, it's wonderful to have you here with us on May 4th.
Yeah, May the
And
4th.
I think we're about to start. Yes, indeed. May 4th,
Great.
May the 4th. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm delighted to welcome everyone to the 5th Swarovski Foundation in Conversation event. This series addresses economic, environmental, and social challenges faced by society and our world. Each month, we invite distinguished experts from fields such as academia, philanthropy, environmental science, and the creative industries to examine and raise awareness around these themes. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming our distinguished guest, Joey Ryman. Joey is globally known as the King of Corporate Purpose. For the past 25 years, he has helped Fortune 500 companies discover, articulate, and activate their company and brand purpose. Fast Company named Joey one of the 100 people who will change the way the world thinks. He's also a renowned author and businessman, adjunct marketing professor at the Emory University Business School, and founder and chairman of Brand New World, the most purposeful storytelling company in the world. The Swarovski Foundation is based on clear, strong values, which encompass honesty, responsibility, empathy, and respect towards individuals and communities. As an organization, we strive to make sure that these values are always at the core of the work we do with our partners. And with Joey today, we would like to explore how an organization's purpose is built and how it can improve and inspire the mindset of the people operating within its network, bringing people and prosperity, hope, and positivity into their lives. Joey and I were planning to march forth on March 4th, but had to reschedule to today, which is also fantastic because May 4th is a special day to think about our purpose and our capabilities in organizations and society for greater public good. So may the force be with us today on May 4th. So Joey, welcome so much to our
Thank you.
In Conversation series. It's so super to have you
Thank you.
after having had the honor to have worked with you for a few years now. Let's just start right on. Tell us about the fact that you are the godfather of purpose, and
Well,
you are the first person who coined purpose as the main driver of business success. And you often say that purpose is the key to build the world, and that leaders who can demonstrate to be purpose-driven can positively impact society.
absolutely. And Nadia, it's been a long road. I'm fond of telling people that the first meeting I had, which was in 1994, where the CEO was Bob Nardelli, the former CEO of Home Depot, and he actually thought I was selling him a multi-purpose cleaner. He had no idea what purpose was. And we've come such a long way. And the best way I can describe the beauty and the power of purpose is through Mark Twain's amazing quote, my favorite quote of all time. He said, "The two best days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why." And that goes for businesses as well as people. The power of why is enormous. And the fact that business now recognizes the instrument of why and asks deeper questions is actually expanding the orbit of caring for business globally. So we're at a very exciting time, probably the most exciting time in business since the Renaissance.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a very challenging time in general in this world. I mean, we're going through, the challenge in terms of climate, we're a world health crisis, racial injustice, gender inequality, political unrest, just to name a few. And surely these all are triggers for hopelessness. How can we counter the fear and the sense of instability to bring about more positivity in our lives, and also interlinking that with purpose?
Right. Great question. And to answer that question, we go back in history to the last time something like this happened. It was the 15th century. We had 40,000 refugees coming in from Greece with these books called the Humanities. And they landed in a small town of Florence And the Medicis did something nobody had ever done before. They said, why don't we help these people? Why don't we support them? Why don't we become patrons of their art and their artistic endeavors? And at the same time, Nadia, we had the Black Plague. And the Black Plague was ravaged the world, like COVID. So at the intersection of the worst possible health disaster and the most benevolent bank called the Medicis, people were heightened, their senses were heightened to do something good for the world. And what they did was they supported Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Gutenberg, and we got shipping, and we got art, and we got churches and public spaces. It was magnificent. And the fact is, a lot of people don't know this, but Leonardo da Vinci, when he painted the Mona Lisa, he also did something no painter had ever done, emblematic of what he thought was a more purposeful world, was he put a smile on Mona Lisa, and no painting, no portrait had ever had a smile before. But he was so excited about the future of the world that he thought that Mona Lisa should be smiling, if not winking. And he accomplished it. And I just love the fact that the Mona Lisa is the most revered and expensive work of art, because purpose, it's really about purpose and the work of art and the art that purpose brings to the world.
Mm-hmm. That's so fascinating. I actually didn't realize that Mona Lisa was the first portrait with a smile. That is really fantastic.
Unheard of.
And daring of one individual to put forth his positivity, so to speak, by adding that.
That's what's happening now. Companies are becoming more daring because they realize that government's not going to save the world. And religion, as much as I love it, is not going to save the world. But business might have a chance of expanding their orbit of caring to include stakeholders, not just shareholders. And because of COVID, our sense of givingness, our sense of lovingness, our sense of being genuine, our sense of being not immortal has all been heightened. And as a result, it's accelerated the movements of purposeful companies, which is, for me, the most exciting thing to watch.
No, it's amazing. And, this entire greater awareness or mindfulness, if you will, is really kind of also reflected in the new coining within organizations of the CSR departments, the corporate social responsibility departments, as they were called in the past. Then it moved on to calling them sustainability. And now they're called ESG, environmental and social governance.
And I'll even push that a little further. Corporate social responsibility is actually somewhat of a punitive term. It suggests that you have a responsibility to give back, and suggests also that it's not natural to give back. Now, somebody who would want to give back would not see it as a responsibility. They would see it as an opportunity. So I like to call it CSO, corporate social opportunity. It's an opportunity for the Fortune 500 to become the Fortunate 500, to actually support people and give them, and not just sell things, but heal things and heal the world. So we're at a sea change. It's been a sea change. Lots of things have shifted in business, but they're all very positive, and they all point to a more humane society.
Mm-hmm. That's really amazing. And I just remember when that shift kind of happened in the last decade, with a greater emphasis on organizations to have that positive impact. But now, how do you see that impact also kind of shifting more over to the individual, especially individuals in this free world?
Well,
how, in particular, does the teaching of purpose, inspire individuals, and what's the messaging? How's the purpose driven within people or found within people?
Yes, great question, and I think a great answer. If you go back to the Fortune 100 companies 25 years ago, and you go down the list, they were all companies with tangibles, oil, plastics, they things that you could touch. It was just a lot of stuff. If you go to the same list today, they're all intangible, tech, mindfulness. Nothing is tangible. So it turns out that the intangibles, the things we can't touch, actually touch us more so from a profit point of view than what it was before. And that's incredibly encouraging because it means that we are shifting from just a mindset to a heart set, or what I call a gift set. That it's not just having a right mindset, but a gift set suggesting that for me to help someone else is a gift, and it's also a gift to the world. And we all feel better when we help someone else. And what we're now seeing is corporate constructs being rebuilt to help people. And one of the key things in this rebuilding is some nomenclature that's worth exploring for a moment. When I went into marketing, there was something called a mission. There were very few visions, but there were missions, and there certainly wasn't any purpose. Well, a mission is what we do. It's what we do. It's what we are told to do when we go to work. It's what we sell. A vision is not a what. A vision is where we're going. I mean, Bill Gates, I know it's a sore subject, but Bill Gates wanted to put a laptop on everyone's lap. It's a vision, it's geography, it's financial. But unlike a mission, which is a what, and a vision, which is a where, a purpose is a why. Mm-hmm. And if you find that why, you can deal with any what, who, where, when, enemies, good times get better, and bad times aren't as bad. But you got to have that why. What gets you up in the morning? If you can answer that question, and you're really getting up in the morning instead of dragging, you've probably found your why, or you're close to it. But those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. When you lose track of time, what are you doing? Because that's another clue to your purpose. So we're asking very different questions and we're getting very different answers. And the answers are in the form of not missions and visions, but true, genuine purpose, which is, again, fabulous.
So what is it that you're doing when you lose track of time?
Well, that's a slippery slope question. But I know that when I'm working and I'm working on something that I love and I look up at the clock, I have no concept of what just happened because 4 hours just went by in 4 minutes. And that's incredible. There's a German proverb loosely translated as love knows no clock. And what that means is that if you find what you love and you love what you do, you lose track of time, but not track of what you were meant to do on this earth. So, yeah, they're great questions. I teach at Emory. I've been teaching there 25 years, and I often tell my students to go back to their baby books and see what they were like when they were children, because that's another clue. What we were doing as children really gives us an insight into what's truly genuine and what really turns us on. And that's been very helpful. Unfortunately, most of my students' parents don't keep baby books anymore. But for those who do, it's worth going back. I have a chapter in my book called The Fruits. The fruits are in the roots. And that's a very big clue on how you find your purpose, to go back to the roots of an organization, to go back to the beginnings, when things were when you were naive, when things were innocent, when there was uncertainty. One of my big pet peeves is when people get upset because things are uncertain. And I tell my students, are you kidding? Uncertainty is the only time when anything is possible. When anything is possible. But you've got to be in the midst of uncertainty. Otherwise, you're just going to do what's possible and you're going to follow somebody else's footprints instead of what's in your heart. So love uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. That's so amazing, actually. That's so comforting, actually.
It is, because
very comforting. That's,
right.
The unknown shouldn't be so scary.
Yeah, you don't want to hang out with a faithful formalist. First of all, faithful formalists are boring. I don't know if you've ever gone out to dinner with a formalist, but it is so trying. And I'm always going like this to the waiter for the check. You want to be with somebody who's distinctive, who's got new ideas, and has not been routinized. I told my when my kids were in grammar school, I went to the principal and I said, please forgive me. I wrote this book, Thinking for a Living, and the whole book is about not degeniusing our children. And I have a feeling that by the time Alden and Julian got into 4th grade, you were degeniusing them by routinizing them, by having them memorize stuff versus being mesmerized by stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that childhood. If one child is memorizing and the other is mesmerizing, I mean, who do you? It's what made Einstein Einstein. When he was 7 years old, his grandfather gave him a compass, and his grandfather was trying to explain the compass, and all he wanted to know was what was behind the needle. Why does the needle do that? And that question would serve as his quest throughout his lifetime. Mm-hmm. And he refers back to that. He was just taught to ask why.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, but that also requires a bit of dreaming, I have to say, and really thinking out of the box. So
yeah.
How do you encourage also in your books and in your lectures and when you speak to your corporations, the concept of dreams, of thinking freely, of having visions and turning those visions into reality and into action? So,
yes. Well, I had a great mentor many years ago named Federico Fellini, and he told me that I remember what he said. He said, dreams begin with dreamers. And you're not here working with me to find out about dreams. You're here to build yourself like a dream, to build yourself into a dreamer. And for that, you're going to have to let go of a lot of things you've learned. And that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to let go of things I've learned and look for radical ideas in the peripheries, outside the constructs that we all make for ourselves. And I think a part of that is who you hang out with. You don't want to be hanging out with a realist. But when people say, Nadia, Joey, we need a reality check, I would get up and leave. Because a reality check is actually a bribe for you to put your dreams away. It's sort of like a salary. A salary can be very dangerous because very often I see this with my students, especially my MBA students. They get a big salary and all of a sudden they put the dream away. And they'd say to me, oh, Joey, once I make enough money, I'm going to go back to my dreams. They never do. They never do.
Yeah, I think people are very fortunate if they can make the dreams reality.
Yes. If they live a fantasy life, they're living a good life. And if you think about it, this would have sounded like fantasy 200 years ago when business first evolved. The idea of business being a benevolent partner, being your wingman, if you will, that was fantasy. I mean, even in the 70s with Friedman economics, I mean, it was all about profit. If you made a profit, the shareholders were happy. And if you made money, everybody was happy. Well, the fact of the matter is that's not enough anymore. We have to make meaning that makes money. In fact, if you have meaning, you'll make a lot more money. So whether you're a fanatic or you're a mercenary or a missionary, purpose is going to serve you well. Mm-hmm. And it'll serve others well. The service industries, I had a talk with the CEO of Amex, and I said, I don't understand service. Maybe you could explain it to me. And he pointed, service is taking care of the customer. I said, you know what? I'm not buying this taking care of the customer stuff. I said, I'll tell you what service is. And it comes from a philosopher named Mayeroff, who in the 50s wrote a beautiful book that people viewing this should go out and get, called On Caring. It's about 80 pages. One of the most important books ever written, because let me cull it down or melt it down to one sentence, which is what the book's about. Mayeroff says caring is not taking care of another person. That's bupkis. That's nothing. Caring is having a deep understanding of another person, and here comes the most unbelievable part, in service of their growth. So it's not enough to care about somebody. If you're not caring about them in service of their growth, you're not caring. And this was Mayeroff's tremendous insight. And it's so true, and it's so beautiful, and it's so purposeful, because it asks deeper questions. and asks us to really think about those questions, not just do it or say it, which is the bane of marketing today. You know, people know how to say stuff. We spend $1 trillion a year, Nadia, on marketing. $1 trillion, nearly $1 trillion a year. But when it comes to doing it, not just saying it, maybe we spend a couple million. But when it comes to being it, not a nickel. You know, that's just a given. And for most people, it's a distraction. People don't want to actually be themselves because they're told what to be. And that's a problem, because part of purpose is finding your own why and not necessarily buying into your peers. And these are the enemies: your peers, your professors, or your parents. Those are the 3 Ps that will mess you up every time. And I'm very, very careful about how I teach, because a teacher who becomes dogmatic ends up just barking the wrong rules. I mean, you've got to, you know, the word education is from the Latin word educare, which means to pull out of someone's heart. Educare, the Latin root, means to pull out of someone's heart. That it doesn't mean to push into someone's head. And that's what education's done. And I do my best, even though it's very late in the game, of teaching these BBAs and MBAs, or having them unlearn as much as possible.
Well, I have to say that's amazing, and how lucky for your students. Now, what about your students, so to speak, in the corporations that you are lecturing to?
Yes.
How is that react, and how do corporations allow them to react to what it is that you are teaching them?
Well, it helps that the CEOs now, and the CMOs, who I would say is an acronym for Chief Meaning Officers, not Chief Marketing Officers, that they're more open to looking at things differently. They still want to market, but as I tell my students this, I tell every client I have this: I'm going to teach you everything you know about marketing, you want to know about marketing, in one sentence, so we can move on to something important. And that sentence is: be a friend of their excitement. That's all.
Yeah, what was it?
Be a friend of their excitement. I mean, think about when you were dating or even in marriage. If you're a friend of someone's excitement, they're going to love you, of course, rather than just talk about yourself. It's the same thing with consumers. And if you're a friend of their excitement, they're going to come along, because they know that you have a deeper understanding of who they are in service of their growth, which goes back to Mayrov. So that's a very important model. And to answer your question more deeply, the CEOs are now realizing that they're not selling tangibles as much as they are hiring intangibles. It's called talent. And if the talent is happy, then the stakeholders will be happy, because the output will be greater. And think about it, that's what we have. Those are our assets, our people. And if we don't have those assets, we should just pack it up. And the companies that are doing better than all the other companies, their scores around being happy at work are through the roof. I think I may have shared this with you a couple of years ago, that Gallup did a poll in the United States, and they asked people, are you happy at work or unhappy? 71% said they were unhappy. 25% of that group said they were incredibly unhappy. And Gallup called them cave dwellers. CAVE is an acronym for consistently against virtually everything. So how do you mitigate? What is the antidote to this dis-ease with my life and dis-ease with my work? Well, it's being part of a greater story. It's being part of that purpose. It's getting up in the morning and saying, you know, if I work at Tesla, I get up in the morning and my job, according to Musk's purpose, is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. So in other words, I'm saving lives. So do I want to work for a car company that's been driven by profits, or do I want to save lives? I certainly want to save lives. So the Tesla person has a much better morning than another car company's person.
Knowing that they're contributing to a greater good.
Yes, the public good. The public good.
Greater public good.
Yes.
And on that note, can you mention a few other companies that you have worked with, or could you tell us, speaking of dreaming and fantasy, a little bit also about Walt Disney and what Walt Disney
Yeah.
himself
I'm so glad you asked that,
go
Nadia, because
through?
I love him. Two stories about Walt Disney that'll tell you everything about Walt Disney and the purpose of Disney. The first story is when Disney decided to build Disney World, he had no money. He went to Roy. Roy had $200. That was, so he took from his brother, the $200. He went to not 100 banks, not 200 banks, not 300 banks, but 303 banks. And the 303rd bank, which at that time was Trust Company, which would evolve into SunTrust, which would evolve into Truist, said, you know what? We're not going to bankroll you, but we are going to back you. And with that comes a bankroll. So he got the money to build Disney World. And this is the other story that tells you everything. When he commissioned a group of architects to build Disney World, they came back to him with plans. And they said, Mr. Disney, this is like building a city, a new world. So we're going to put it into 8 phases. And phase 1 is going to be infrastructure. Phase 2 is going to be roads. 3, and he gets all the way to 8. And he goes, and the 8th, you're going to love this, Mr. Disney, is the Magic Castle. And Disney was befuddled. He said, guys, we can't do this. This is all backwards. You've got to build the Magic Castle first so that people know what we stand for. This is not just a brand, it's a stand. And I stand for fantasy, magic. And if I don't have the Magic Castle, they won't know what we're building. We could be building, condos. This is a magic castle. And everyone here is going to touch that magic. But the most important people that need to touch that magic are the people building Disney World so that they build magic into the bricks and mortar. That's just a beautiful, heartwarming, amazing story about a hero, a true hero in the sense that he recognized the beauty of, or the magic, or the innocence of childhood and how magical that is. The great psychologist Piaget, he said, all that genius is retrieving your childhood. And Walt Disney knew that better than anyone.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, I personally was very much affected by that as a child. But then again, I grew up in post-World War II Austria. So coming to Florida and going to Disney World, I was just absolutely blown away about the friendliness of all the workers.
Which is magic.
Yeah, starting at the entrance, welcome, so nice.
True, Nadia.
And I remember thinking, wow, that's a wonderful reality. And then I thought, gosh, well, that was a wonderful fantasy.
Yes.
But, I just hate to think, no, that is just a fantasy.
Well,
it'd be wonderful if that's a reality. And then, suddenly you realize, yes, you can make that a reality, at least your own reality.
Yes.
By
especially for leaders. The new leadership is friendship. If I'm a friend to my employees, I'm a great leader. If I'm a friend to my shareholders, I make them more money. If I'm a friend to my suppliers, they trust me. Friendship is a very underserved, undervalued concept. And it comes from the notion that love, and this will blow your mind, that love is the go-to. It's like, oh, I met somebody, I'm in love with them. Oh, really? And basically, it's no different than a CEO standing up in front of his company and saying, I love you guys, I love you. Well, not true. How could you love me? I mean, what the psychologists have figured out is that you can't love someone unless you do 2 other things first. You have to have an understanding of the person. Now this goes back to Mayrhof. Remember, he said, if I have a deep understanding of another in service of their growth, they're going to fall in love with me. So now I've got this notion of understanding. So I understand you, you understand me. What happens from that? Well, over a short period of time, we start to trust that person because they know me. And I trust them because they're good to me. They know me. And from understanding to trust, then comes love. It's not the other way around. And most people, especially a lot of my students, they go right to love and it ends in 3 weeks. But if they had an understanding and they had a trust, that's the real glue. That's the cement. That's the mortar. Those are the bricks.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Incredible. And
Yeah.
so, Joey, can you tell us about some other companies that you're working with and how that thought process?
Well, the dirtiest company, when I say dirty, the ones really emitting the most refuse and carbon was a carpet company in Georgia called Interface. They were the filthiest company in the world. And in 1994, their CEO had what he called a spear in the chest moment, where he realized that he was killing the world. And he brought in a lot of consultants, some academics, and realized that in order to love the world, which he wanted to do, he would have to tear apart the way carpets are made and start new. And he called it the mountain of sustainability. And he started that in 1994. Today, that company, next to Patagonia, is the most loving company to the planet. And it's those stories that inspire other people. And their purpose is to lead industry to love the world. Imagine that they have shareholders who've never heard the word love, let alone in their marriage or relationship. And here in the lobby, it says, lead industry to love the world. That's beautiful. Well, I want to work for that company. And I want to work for that CEO. And that CEO did really well. And the company did really well. And what we know is that many of these purposeful companies have stories like that. Milton Hershey, you know Hershey chocolate. I'm not sure it's your preferred chocolate, but Hershey was a very successful company. But then the Depression hit and they had to fire hundreds of people. Their CEO went to Germany, found a machine that could take the place of 600 men. Bought the machine, brought it back. When Hershey learned about this, he had the people at Hershey dig a ditch, bury the machine. He fired the CEO and he hired another 600 men. So these are the stories that they're mythology, but they give you an insight into what happens if I love the world. And then the question is, how will you love the world? How will you love the world? Because you can't hug a checkbook. I mean, if I throw money at somebody I like or love, doesn't assure the relationship. So, but if I love them, and if I have a deep understanding of them, and they trust me and I trust them, that's a solid relationship. And that's what we see most excitingly, that business is shifting into humanity. So, humanity, foundations, what am I doing for my fellow human being? That's going to be the big thing after purpose. And what that means is that unless you participate, you're not part of the winning team. Participation is the next big thing after purpose, because purpose without participation is just parchment. It's a business card, it's an elevator sign, it's basically BS. And millennials have BS meters. They're born with BS meters. 96% of them won't go to a company unless the company has a stated purpose. Imagine that. And they're driving the CEOs, because CEOs, they're pretty concretized, they're pretty routinized. It's the new talent that's directing the CEOs to be more mindful of the heart. And purpose certainly is a journey from the mind to the heart.
That's amazing. So I can imagine it's not just the young employees that are putting that pressure on, but certainly also the consumer must be shifting that way and must be looking for products that also have
meaning,
purpose and meaning attached to them. And
well, a couple of years ago, I wrote an article called "Welcome the Kaboomer," and what I defined the kaboomer was a boomer like myself who accumulates tons of stuff. I accumulated tons of stuff, and then around 50, 60 years old, they realize this is just stuff. Do I need this? I don't need this. Why did I buy this? And you can't get enough of what you don't need. So you're stuck with all this stuff, and then it goes kaboom, and hence the word kaboomer. Because I think most boomers, they go kaboom. It's just so much stuff in the closets and under the bed, in the bank accounts.
I think that might still be a hoarding instinct from like more lean times,
Perhaps, but the fact is
I
that
have to say, there's certainly something to say about the recyclability and the usability of things.
yes.
I have quite a few little clothes stashed away in my closet, but with the excuse I'm saving them for my daughters.
That's
And
great.
now starting to wear my clothes, indeed, and shoes and jewelry and makeup and
Sustainability,
for sharing.
as you know, sustainability is key now. One of the great columns of our future. And, as I've often said, if you're not practicing sustainability, you're practicing insanability, because it's just insane to throw stuff out, to not be mindful of nature. And now we're recognizing, even in the business world, because the business world has embraced a new science called biomimicry, that if we look at nature as a model,
yes,
as a mentor, and as a measurement, we're going to do just fine. But think about that. Nature as a model. 4 seasons or 4 quarters. Well, the seasons aren't the same each time, but you can have a bad quarter because that's when things dry up, but things are going to come back. I mean, it's just a new way of thinking about things and measuring things, and really taking care of our natural resources. Last week on some radio show, I talked about they asked me, how do we stop global warming? I said, simple answer, human warming. I mean, if humans warm, they're going to be fine, because they'll be cognizant of the atrocities that we're committing every day. We need human warming.
Absolutely. And I think that really comes with the education and caring, certainly for the young generation, increasing the awareness about the issues that are out there in the environment, and also about the solutions that
your foundation is educate. It really should be called education, because that's what you're doing. And that's, as you said, education is the foundation for everything. If we don't have that, we have nothing else.
No, you're absolutely right. It's amazing. We've seen so many examples in the water school, for example,
Yes.
We were not expecting the byproduct of educating these children how to handle water to be total self-empowerment. It was amazing because children suddenly felt totally self-confident, knowing that they as individuals can contribute to the various different issues, and money is not relevant at all. It is really that personal human power that can be implemented.
And when they recognize that,
where I must feel like, materialism has been so destructive to people's sense of ability to have personal accountability. And I think that just really goes back to what you're saying, just the intangible also. How the world was moved from the tangible to the intangible.
And that's good. It means that our minds are at work. And, the person who, creativity, which Einstein said is intelligence having fun, is having its day. And that's very good news.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say also, back to education, we work very closely with Wendy Kopp, who created Teach for All.
That's right. Amazing person.
Yeah, and it's amazing how Teach for All started. Wendy looked around, she had so many of her friends just graduating from universities and they couldn't get jobs. Yet at the same time, she was in San Francisco and she realized all these high schools couldn't get teachers.
Right.
So she convinced her freshly graduated friends to teach, and they all taught without a teaching degree, and the grade point average of these students went up.
Fabulous.
So we're telling you about teaching, and these people, they taught because they wanted to teach. They wanted truly to care and to help these children, reach their educational goal, and they did. And so this was just a short-term task for these teachers, but a lot of them felt so fulfilled seeing how they were helping these children that they actually remained to be teachers without
That's
official
beautiful.
training, but really high success rate.
Well, one of the things I've learned about teachers is that they're, of all the professions, they're living their purpose. You don't become a math teacher because you couldn't be an English teacher. You become a math teacher because you like math. You don't be a history buff because you like English. I mean, and they're really teaching purpose. The way they teach, the best teachers are teaching purpose, their own purpose. And, I remember my fifth grade teacher, who was a history teacher, who was so alive and so, he just made history more real than the present. And I found my love for history. So these are very important formative years. And you need those teachers that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's almost like storytelling, back to storytelling, the
Yeah,
way you convey the information. If
right.
you tell it with enthusiasm, it actually sticks so much
Yeah.
more than if there's a different sentiment behind it.
Yes, and also because of our prefrontal cortex, which is that part of the brain over here, that prefrontal cortex makes us meaning-seeking creatures. That's what that prefrontal cortex is there for, to search for meaning. And the search for meaning, one of my favorite books, Man's Search for Meaning, another book all your viewers should buy, written by this Viennese psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl. I'll try to sum up the book. He was in Auschwitz and he saw the atrocities and horrors, but he decided that it would be a good idea to get to know these people. And interesting, right? Because he didn't say, he hadn't read Meroff wasn't even born yet, but he was actually in search of a deeper understanding of these people. Well, about 4 months into his stay there, he realized that the people who had greater purpose were actually surviving and thriving, and the ones without purpose were dying. And he wrote this book about that. And it's a remarkable book because even in the squalor and the most heinous environment, if we have a reason for being, and his reason was, I'm going to learn everyone's story, and then I'm going to teach these lessons at school. And that's just what he did. And his book sold 100 million copies, which tells you there's something in that book.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So the question is, how can we help people find their purpose? What's out there that can help people find the purpose? I can only tell you on that note, it's been really amazing for the foundation to work with the UN and to really also try to implement the UN SDGs.
Yes.
That's been an incredible anchor for us. How do you see that in the corporate?
Nadia, it's by telling everybody, go to that website and look at those SDGs, look at those 17 efforts and see where you line up. Aristotle, I get all this credit for coming up with purpose, but it was really Aristotle's model that I lifted. Aristotle in 5 BC said, where your distinctive talents intersect with the needs of the world, there lies your vocare. And vocare is Latin for calling. So I just changed it to purpose. But it's so true. Where your talents, your gifts intersect with the needs of the world, there lies your calling, your vocare, your purpose. And that's the easiest way to begin your search. You're always welcome to buy my book, The Story of Purpose.
Yes.
And there's a lot of literature out there now about purpose. And everyone's got these great stories. And I would stay open, be vulnerable. Vulnerability is the key door. A vulnerable door will let the right people in.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And on that note, I remember you telling me a story about J.K. Rowling.
Yes. Yeah. J.K. Rowling.
About her vulnerability.
How's this for a purposeful woman? J.K. Rowling was turned down by 77 publishers. They said things to her like, this is nonsense. Like, grow up. This is a kid's book. Can you imagine hearing all that and having the stamina and the perseverance and the focus to march forth? And of course, she lived in squalor, but she didn't stop. And when asked a couple years ago at a conference, what's what's the foundation? What's your foundation that allowed you to become J.K. Rowling? And she said, my foundation is rock bottom. And that was her foundation. So even being at rock bottom as she was, nothing could stop her from living her purpose. And that's what I wish for everybody who's watching this. As I started, you've got to find your why. There's a wonderful little story about an African-American woman who was 19, a dancer all her life. She was invited to the Apollo Theater to dance, and everyone showed up, the critics, her parents, the place was packed at this theater in Harlem. And she came out, they introduced her as the next great dancer. And she tapped on the microphone and looked at her mom and said, Mom, I can't dance. And the place was shattered with silence. And she said, but I will sing. And Ella Fitzgerald belted out a song that changed the world, changed jazz, and solidified her as the queen.
Right now.
I get goosebumps too. Because goosebumps are the best symptom of having your purpose nearby. Like if you get goosebumps, you're in the right place.
Oh, well, I love it. It's amazing. And how courageous Ella was to share that right then and there with everyone.
Yes.
But since I would love you to tell us the story about George Lucas, since it is May 4th.
Yes, okay.
And what
one of my favorite stories about storytelling. So George Lucas, very talented guy, also turned down at every studio. But he was relentless, and it was a hard time for him, going from studio to studio. And he finally got, I think it was the 7th rewrite of Star Wars 1. And he just was beside himself. He just could not get his act together, couldn't get the script together, was really probably depressed. And he learned about a professor at Sarah Lawrence named Joseph Campbell, who was, his specialty was mythology and what he called the hero's journey. And this is a very important story because it is the basis of all great stories that Campbell had figured out. And Lucas invited Campbell to come look at the script. Joseph Campbell looked at the script, it's like 80 pages, and go, this is a mess. So he put it in the order of the hero's journey, starting with Luke Skywalker, who, like all of us, we started in a place that is ordinary. Then we get a calling. In Luke's case, it was toasting his aunt and uncle. And then we decide we have a bigger purpose, but we're reluctant. And reluctance is part of finding your purpose. However, according to Campbell, allies show up, friends show up, like Harrison Ford, Chewbacca, Princess Leia, CP3O, R2D2. And they become your allies to help you thwart the evil empire. So now we've got ordinary, calling, reluctance, moving into the cave, and then we win. But Campbell was very bright because he knew that in stories, you just don't win and things are happily ever after. There's yet one more challenge. And that's what we experience when we're in a movie theater, where we think everything's fine, and then some guy jumps out of a bathtub and tries to strangle some other guy's wife. And we go, oh my God, I thought it was over. And then after this all happens, Harrison Ford or she or whoever now wins the day, or Luke gets the princess and saves the universe. And that Excalibur, that gift, he brings back to society to share with all of us in movie theaters. Well, I got to tell you, Campbell is a genius. And that hero's journey is a good model for us to think about as we go through our lives. We live in the ordinary world. We get a call. Could be a phone call. Could be a song. Could be a letter from long ago. could be our parent, it could be anything. We're reluctant, so don't worry, but we find friends who help us. And then we slay the dragon, knowing that it's not over yet. But when it is over, everyone else just begins. Good story.
Fantastic. And that can be a very good guide to everyone's life.
Yes, it is.
Calling, have greater mindfulness, consideration,
Yep.
consciousness.
Well, Campbell says we all go through that journey, except those who say, I'm not going, which I try to help as much as possible. But a lot of people don't take that journey.
So it's good to take the journey and just hope that the force may be with you.
Yes.
Great, my Joey. Well, listen, we could talk on and on and on and on and on. These are such great examples, and so interesting to really understand the background of a lot of these stories and movies and individuals and books. And we're going to definitely summarize a lot of your key points and then send it out in a newsletter. But it's an incredible inspiration.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. You're an incredible inspiration.
No, and we'd love to just open this up also for the audience. I think we have some questions that have come through. So question number one is, Joey, how did you get into purpose work? And do you find that it's different right now than 10 years ago? And how might it change in the future, I guess, with all of the ESG issues like climate change?
Yes. Well, we've never been in a better time to be talking about purpose. It's changed dramatically. It changes every year. I mean, when I first started talking about purpose, people thought, oh, if I articulate my purpose, that's enough. Well, that's not true. We already talked about the power of participation. The bigger question is, how did I get into purpose? Which I think is worthy of a very short story. When I was in college, my parents wanted me to go to law school, and I didn't want to go to law school. They said, look, we're not going to pay for this college unless you take the LSATs. So I got into law school, but I didn't want to go to law school. So I wrote a movie called RSVP. It was a story of 200 international debutantes who get kidnapped by 2 Jewish terrorists. They're held hostage at the Plaza Hotel and until the Middle East comes to an agreement. I took that script and I sent it to the French director, Francois Truffaut, and the Italian director, Federico Fellini. And I never heard from Truffaut, but I did hear from Fellini. They gave me an internship. I wasn't paid anything. I ended up making coffee on the set of Casanova with Donald Sutherland. He wasn't making coffee. I was making coffee for everybody else. And while I was there, I met an Italian princess. It was a great summer. But one night I was in the backseat of her car. She swerved through a red light and hit a bus at about 60 miles an hour. She was fine. Actually, her friend next to her was fine. But my arm got caught between the 2 bucket seats and was basically severed. I was paralyzed. Oh. And I was taken to a hospital where I would recuperate, had great surgeons. I had a lot of nuns praying for me. And I got everything back. I got everything back. And people said, this is not a miracle of medicine. This is a medicine of miracles, which I totally bought into. And I said to God, I remember praying in this Italian hospital, if you give me my hand back, I will do something great with it. And so I went into advertising, which is not exactly the part of the bargain that I think he or she was hoping for. But I had a meteoric rise in advertising. And when I got to the top of the mountain, I remember some student asking me, well, what's at the top of the mountain? I said, all the awards that you won. And that's all there was. And in 94, I realized that I had built a $250 million firm, but it was just selling a lot of stuff to people that didn't need the stuff. And as I said earlier, you can't get enough of what you don't need. And I actually hung out at churches and went to temple and did a lot of soul searching. And I realized I didn't make good on my promise. And I fired everyone. I outplaced everyone in my firm, over 200 people. I fired all the clients. And I started a company called Bright House, who instead of marketing and selling stuff would help other people find a greater purpose so they could live a better life and that business could indeed finally do better. And that's how it started. And if it wasn't for that car accident, and yes, it did take me 20 years to find it. Not everybody finds their purpose overnight, but I had also, like Ray, like the interface guy, a spear in the chest moment where I realized there's got to be more to marketing than just selling stuff. Maybe marketers can be healers. I hope I answered your question.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be amazing if marketers would think in terms of healing. Fantastic. Okay, we've got 2 more questions. So if we found your real purpose, how do you establish it?
Oh, okay.
If one finds one's real purpose, how does
again,
one establish it?
by way of story, I think it's worth telling. You know, I wanted to be a filmmaker. And then I got in the car accident. I wrote a musical. It almost made it to off-Broadway, but didn't. And then I decided that, okay, I can't be a filmmaker, but maybe I can still be a filmmaker. Because in advertising, the films they're just 30 seconds long. And I'll start there and live my purpose. Now, I didn't exactly live the purpose because I wasn't helping other people, because selling stuff to people doesn't help anyone. But it was a way of integrating my dream into my reality. And I tell my students this: don't give up on your dreams. But you might have parents that want more of a reality, but find something where you can do both. And when you're ready to make the jump, know that when you leap, the net will appear. And it takes lots of courage. And I did that. Okay, I'll give you to, yes, okay, I'm sorry, I just had it. So if you, so by integrating your dreams into reality, that's the best way to do it. The other way to do it is just to write it down. You know, I wrote a book called Thumbs Up, and the foreword was written by Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, Arun Gandhi. And I wanted to thank Arun Gandhi for writing the foreword, so I took him to dinner. And I said, Arun, do you mind, I know this is a strange question, but did your grandfather ever write down his purpose? I mean, do you have any do you remember what he said? And he opened his wallet and he took out a glassine envelope, those really weird plastic glassine envelopes. And there was a piece of paper in his envelope. And on the piece of paper was a note from his grandfather that he gave to his grandson. And it said, to wipe every tear from every eye. That's my purpose. So this is an amazing moment, which we both shared. And I'm sharing it with you now because that's all he had to do was write it down and then live it. And he lived it. You know, the guy went to Harvard. He dressed in 3-piece suits and then he gave it all up for a pair of spectacles and white pajamas. The fact of the matter is, he believed and he had a great purpose.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. And I wonder if, having gone to Harvard, having left his society to see something different, come back home and see life from a different point of view.
Yes. He had a calling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have one more question.
Okay.
You talked about millennials. Will Gen Zers have a different purpose? Or are they on the same path as
they're on the same path? You know, this is an evolving construct, purpose. It goes back very many centuries. I think Gen Z will be even more adamant about purpose, and they'll take us to a place we have not been to. So I have great hopes for them, as I do the Mars generation, and I think millennials are leading the way. Thank God for them.
Yeah. Great. Well, they seem to have learned a lot, but also learned from all the lessons that the previous generations have learned.
Yeah, they need to do a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, listen, time's up. So I just wanted to thank you so much. I have to say this was such an insight for me, as always, and I hope also, I'm sure, for our listeners as well. But I just really like that it was so human, that was also very much related to corporations. They used to call it the two P's, or the bottom line, the profit. Then it was the double bottom line, people and profit. Now it's people, planet, and profit. And I would like to now add purpose,
Yes,
people, planet. And I can't help but think that the final P, the profit, will increase if you keep those three in mind: purpose, people, and planet.
that's true. Exponentially.
And it really brings us all closer to our heart, closer to our souls, and closer to each other with
Well,
greater
Nadia,
caring.
thank you so much. This has been
So
such a wonderful
thank you.
conversation with you, and
Well,
I wish the foundation the farthest reach, um, because you're doing something so important for the world, and you're an example for the world. So thank you.
that's nice of you to say. We have angels on earth who are working in this foundation. We just absolutely are so appreciative of our partners. We're so appreciative of that incredible collaborative and cooperative space in that NGO space. And there's a lot of work to be done by everyone, but we just really appreciate people like you who are such incredible thought leaders and thinkers, and you're shifting the paradigm for the better. So
Thank,
thank you so much for sharing
thank,
your insight with us, and for giving us your time.
thank you.
And best of luck. I wish I could be your student, but thank you for
Well,
giving us this 1 hour.
happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Tomorrow, Cinco de Mayo. In the meantime, we shall enjoy May 4th, and may that force be with us all.
Bye.
Lots of love, Joey.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Alrighty.
Bye, everyone.